Hello and welcome to the Running in Circles podcast. I am Pallav Raval. In today's episode, we will be discussing about the domination of the big four tech companies, which go by the acronym GAFAM or FANGI. The acronym stands for the companies Google, Amazon, Facebook, and Apple. Now, these companies have been accused on antitrust and anti competitive laws. So, analyzing these accusations from various angles and joining me in this conversation is two of my friends, Nikhil and Jayanth.
Hey Pallav, this is Nikhil. Good to be here.
Hi Pallav, this is Jayanth.
Yeah. Hello, guys. To introduce the topic to the audience, I will start with a few numbers. Now, Apple has a market cap of $2.1 trillion. So, if Apple was a standalone country, it would be the eighth richest country in itself. And Microsoft and Amazon similarly have $1.6 trillion. Alphabet has 1.1 trillion, and Facebook has $775 billion. So obviously, they are richer than most countries by themselves. So the first question to you guys would be, how do you think the domination of this scale and money of this amount was possible? Is it because of the industry, or what do you think? How do you think these companies individually became very popular? Starting with you, Giant.
Yeah, so Pallav, I would say these four companies have become such huge in today's tech industries because of the spread of the internet all over the world. Almost each and every person in today's age have access to internet. So though these companies perform different or provide different services and products, all are linked together with internet. So I would say this was the biggest advancement in the tech industry. And coming to Google, which is the largest search engine, it is almost controls the 90% of users in the search engine industry. Apple providing premium smartphones and services. Coming to Amazon, it is regarded as the largest e-commerce website in the world. It has around 40% of market share in the e-commerce side. And Facebook coming to the social media, I would say, leader and providing ad services. So though they are in different fields, they all are linked together through internet, and each and every person has internet today. So that has led to their advancement.
Absolutely spot on, Giant. So, Nikhil, how would you explain how did we get to this domination of this scale?
Thanks, Pallav. I think when we talk about tech companies, it's going by the history of businesses and corporations in general. Tech companies are somewhat of a new phenomenon in the industry. Essentially, you're not judging companies by the profit they produce or the value of their product. It's more about their growth potential and how.
Predictions.
Yeah, exactly. So like predictions on how they'll grow, how their user base would grow, and even if you look at tech startups, their value, like in general, startups values are measured by the profit they generate, right? And that's how their sort of valuation is done in the different stages. With tech companies, it's more about a prediction of how how quickly they'll grow, and how what the potential is. And growth comes from, I think, two areas. It's more, I think, with these big companies, it's more about new users having access to the internet. When you have different countries in Africa, India, China, stuff like that, where people are accessing the internet for the first time, and there are already these established services who they're there, the people are using it, so these people don't want, there's a fear of missing out, essentially, right? So it's almost taken for granted that these new internet users will become customers and subscribers to these big corporations who already have established themselves there.
Yeah. One more thing that I would like to talk is, do you think it's also because it's the tech market and not any other market? Like if you were in any other market, if you don't like a company, you go to the alternate product, right? But because it's the tech domain, there's you don't have like a second choice. Like there's not going to be the second best search engine, or there's not going to be the second best social network, because everybody is hooked on to the first one. So do you think there's like a slight bit of advantage being the leader or something?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's more about, yes, there is a second best, but the distance between first and second is too vast, right? There's a human tendency to avoid change. And people, especially on the internet, if they're subscribed to a service and a user of a certain service or a certain product, they will tend to avoid moving away from that platform just because it's working for them. So there's really no reason for them to switch away. So there's a tendency for companies that are first to market in a certain domain to stay at the top unless there is such a huge revolution. And the only examples I can think of in this regard is coming to smartphones, right? BlackBerry, Nokia, they used to be market leaders in the past, but they were definitely they're left behind in the dust right now with the new smartphone manufacturers. But in general, it takes something significant, such as the advent of smartphones, to topple someone from the top.
Yeah, yeah, that explains a lot. Now, to give my explanation of how these big companies became, I read about this theory called as the aggregation theory, which explains quite how the internet works and how these companies became big. So in the pre-internet times, suppose you had to book a cab, you had to contact the cab regulator service. Now there would be three or four different cab regulator services. You had to contact them because they have the contact to the drivers. But with the internet, what happened was it was all about which app could get the most consumers. So now let's say Uber has the most consumers. Because they have the most consumers, more drivers also subscribe to the Uber service and drive for Uber. And because it's this because internet has become a game of getting more and more consumers, Uber is the middleman in this service of cab service. Because they're the middleman, they get profits from them. So what internet essentially is just getting more and more consumers to use that service, and that gets the profit cycle running. And another example of this would also be Amazon. Amazon started with a very simple model of selling books online, but because they became popular in that field, they expanded to selling anything online. And then they started off with selling um, like e-commerce stuff. And then AWS happened, and AWS was again a very successful venture. So then they started off with Prime and Alexa and other stuff. So the point here is, once you get profits from this, you can expand and expand and expand. So just get the most consumers and keep expanding. uh, so now moving on to the next point of discussion, it would be, because these companies are so big, they have this power of being the regulator of the internet. um, and these powers have not been taken well by lawmakers, and that's why they've been accused on antitrust and anti-competitive grounds. So how would you explain these accusations, starting with you, Jayant? If you could tell us about a few companies.
Yeah, so talking about Google, what Google is accused of is monitoring users' data and also stealing reviews from other web companies. So, what Google is going through is, may since it is the largest search engine in the world, so it is using this as a leverage to gain more advertisers and earn from their ad services called the AdSense. So they are continuously monitoring our data and what we search every day, and they are using that information to as a leverage over the other companies or advertisers to gain the market. Also, there is that's where we have the issue of Google and users' privacy. Though Google gives us many options saying we are the whole end user who controls what we want to share with Google or not. Google is accused of two main things, that is uh, monitoring users' data and stealing reviews from other companies. It is said that Google stole Yelp reviews and posted it in their search engine, saying those were Google reviews. Uh, Coming to AdSense, which is their ad providing services, it is said that Google is monitoring the user's data and what the user searches and goes through every day using Google search engine. Google is providing this data as a leverage over gaining more amount of advertisers, saying it has the most amount of trafficking to Google search engine, and also saying what the user needs and stuff. So, like this, Google is violating the user's privacy and also stealing from other smaller companies or its competitors. Coming to Apple doesn't have issues in their privacy or users' privacy violations, but then they are accused of uh, developers removing apps from the App Store, which they have the whole control of. Uh, since Apple doesn't have a fixed contract with the developer and Apple, they have their own terms and conditions, and those can be changed whenever possible. Recent issue with Apple and the Epic Games was the Fortnite game, which was the most popular in 2019. They removed the Fortnite game from the Apple's app Store because Epic Games didn't want to use the in-app purchases, since they have to pay 30% cut to Apple. So because of that, Apple removed Fortnite from the App Store. So this shows how controlled Apple is within their App Store market and how much the developer has to go through.
Yeah, absolutely. That was pretty spot on for individual companies. Nikhil, what would you think of these accusations? Like, are they valid or invalid? What do you think of it?
I think again, this is something that's sort of unheard of in the league, both the legal sense and in terms of like a business point of view. Because if you think about it, the accusation against Apple, let's say, is that they are controlling their platform too much. Their product itself is the platform. Should the government or should lawmakers or should other companies have a say in how they run their platform? That's one side of the argument. The other side is now, since Apple has such a huge market share, at least in the United States, which is where most of this is happening, they have such a huge market share of the smartphone space. They have to, they have to sort of think of the public good, right? Because you can't take over the whole market and then dictate the terms on how the market is run, right? That's the other side of it. And there's really no precedent for something like this, right? Because regular antitrust accusations and legal lawsuits tend to have sort of a more concrete something to base it on. Because, like, let's say if it's something more tangible, like with the physical product, right? You can say that these guys are trying to sort of keep other people out of the market and promote their own product. But when it comes to tech, it's a little harder to put your finger on something specific, just because this is, again, something that's a product of,
Non-tangible.
yep, exactly, the product of our advancement in the 21st century.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Correct. So there are absolutely two sides to this. One is that they are being very evil, and they are deliberately doing this so that they can watch their competitors and so. But then the other thing is, obviously, because Apple is so committed to privacy, they just want to check that every app doesn't take their own data or something, and that's why they have these strict rules on App Store and other things. So now let's move on to their anti-competitive behavior, and like things like political bias. Where do you stand on things like this? Do you think like Facebook buying Instagram, and then Facebook being a place where there's so much hatred and fake news and political campaigns being shifted and all that? Where do you stand on that, Nikhil?
This is a hard one, I think, and this is something that's of much interest, at least in the United States, with the recent election. um, there are again, multiple sides to this, and there has been a lot of cases where CEOs were called to Congress and sort of interrogated. Right, they were asked questions on how their platforms run, and essentially these accusations of political bias were brought up mostly by Republicans because it the sort of tendency is in social media and on the internet. um you tend to have Republicans and right-leaning personalities shown in bad light. And I personally think this is a product of most of these. You know, Google doesn't really have a hand in how the search results are, displayed. At least according to Sundar Pichai. Uh, it's a product of how people use their platform and how how their crawler tracks data through websites. Now, if there is significant discussions that tend to be against Republicans, you tend to have more, let's say, in a more generic term, against right-leaning politicians and policies. You tend to have more left biased sort of results on Google, just because that's sort of the general consensus on the internet. Is it, should something be done about it? Should each side have an equal voice? I personally, I don't think so. I don't believe in regulation and things like this, just because this is a result of how users behave on the internet, right? If you let it go, let it be unhinged, you tend to have a natural sort of result that you see on things like Google or other platforms. If you sort of bring in regulations into this, then again, these regulators, you tend to have bad luck with regulators in general. We've seen the case with the FCC and Ajit Pai trying to take
Yeah,
control over the free internet. So I don't believe in regulators personally, and you tend to have sort of a fluctuation in terms of the political leanings in government. So I believe the internet should be left alone. Um, Political bias obviously will be a thing based on the number of users
public
from each.
demand or what? Public demand, right?
Yeah, so like it depends on the people and their opinions, whoever is using the internet. It's
Yeah,
not something that the companies are at fault of doing. It's a product of how their users use the service.
yeah, yeah. I think I share that with you because I don't think there's like one single employee who's making the search engines go wrong, or which they claim that's what happening. I think it's big.
Absolutely. Yeah, and if you've seen some of these conversations that happen in Congress with these lawmakers interrogating these CEOs, they have absolutely no idea how the internet works. Right? These people are, I doubt they can use a smartphone on their own. They tend to ask stupid questions and have sort of a very simplistic idea of how complex things such as search engines work. Right?
Yeah,
They, like you said, they believe there's one person sitting behind a computer and changing these search
yeah,
results, against some of these right-leaning politicians.
yeah,
So, obviously, in order to bring sort of legislation in this area, the first thing is you need competent people who actually know how these things work, and
yeah,
that's something we're not there yet.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, so continuing on those lines, there's there's not a one single person who's editing search results, but rather it's some sort of algorithm or some sort of machine learning being applied there, which it's based on public demand, right? So let's say that if more people are looking something, that means that people want to know more about it, and because more people want to know about it, it comes up on the search results more often, and that is a very tricky thing because it also spreads fake news because so many people believe in fake news, and also if there are genuine articles, they also spread up. So I think what the real issue is that we all have to agree that Google is doing a massive job of sorting out information for us. Now that itself is obviously a very tough job, right? Because you don't know what a person exactly wants. I and yeah, that would be my take on it. So anything else you
You
guys
don't
have
know
to
what a
add?
person wants, but Google does, at least
Yeah,
according to them.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So
since what you said on users and the Congress,
Congress. Yeah,
Congress people.
Yes.
Hmm. Yeah, Congress people. not knowing what they are speaking. I just saw a video where a congresswoman was accusing Mark Zuckerberg on taking down a post that was posted by Donald Trump Jr. He posted a picture or something of his drug abuse or something. But how can they, think that as Mark Zuckerberg supporting Joe Biden in the election? So they don't understand what completely they are talking. Also, I feel.
Yeah, and I
Yeah,
think you bring up a good point of how moderation should happen in social media and on the internet. In an ideal world, I think at least in an ideal world, you don't need moderation, right? People left alone should be able to decide what's best for themselves. But and when I say what when they decide what's best for themselves, I mean when you read an article, you shouldn't just take it at its face value. You should look for alternate sources that sort of say the same thing, preferably opposing sources, from both sides of the
yeah,
argument, and then
yeah,
make
yeah,
a decision for yourself. But you can't, at least we've seen so far that that's not something you can trust people with. So
yeah,
you do need moderation, but in moderation, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a good angle.
That is required because there are large, wide category of age groups, and there are, like, even though they have restrictions from 14 years in Facebook or something like that, but then everyone has a Facebook account, even a kid. So we don't know who is using what. So that is a big reason for having moderators. I mean moderations and
Yeah, but you tend to sort of see this lack of, um, let's say, objectivity in people above a certain age group, not below. So it's not about the entry.
Yeah,
It's not the entry that's the problem.
yeah. It's basically
yeah.
everyone using it. Right, right. So coming to the last part of our segment, I would ask a simple question to you guys. Do you think these big companies are gonna be broken up, or that's at least what the intention of the Congress people? So yes or no. Starting with you, Giant.
I don't think they will be broken up or something, even though Congress people are trying to break them down. It's just that even if there are any competitors to these companies, few of them are scared, but some of them are not. Example, Instagram and Snapchat. Instagram CEO felt threatened by when Mark Zuckerberg emailed to him about releasing an app against Instagram. But then he ended
I
up
think
giving
that was
Instagram.
called Facebook Photo, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, so Instagram was later bought by Facebook. Even Facebook thought of buying Snapchat, but Snapchat was not bought. It is still widely spread and largely used app nowadays. It's more like you have your own idea, and you have to bring up with the idea. There will be many people who will be trying to acquire your company or something like that. That shows how much your company is worth. They can't let down and give up on their idea. I guess even though there might be many competitors coming up for these big companies, they will try to break them down or try to put them down. But then these companies will not break because they are very high, very highly spread, and they have become really huge. It's not
I
like
think,
we have to. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I think you brought up a good point there, Jent, with Instagram and Facebook trying to acquire it. I remember reading about another instance of something like this. Apparently, a while ago, there was this website called diapers.com. Essentially, it was a service that you could order diapers from as a subscription or individually, and Amazon was interested in acquiring them. And they, the CEO of diapers.com, he was not interested in being acquired. He wanted to grow his business, which is admirable. I think that's something that all business people should be aiming for. But Amazon was not happy with this. They what they did was, instead of just giving up, they essentially launched their own competing service. And because they were a larger company with more capital, they could afford to start off with a much better offering price wise.
Yeah,
And
the big
soon enough,
capital
within,
advantage.
yep, exactly. And soon enough, they were driven out of the market, just because if you have something that's cheaper on another platform, obviously a customer would prefer to go for that.
Yeah, yeah, that's
And
another thing about big companies, because they have extra capital. They can dump it to a new service, launch it at a cheaper price, get the customers, and eradicate the competitor.
yeah, Exactly. And in the end, what happened was, I think a year later, diapers.com, they were essentially driven out of the market, and they were forced to sell at a much lower value than what they would have, a year ago. So you have, instances where companies take things personally like this and sort of drive away innovation and competition in the market,
Yeah,
which is obviously something that should be dealt with. Now, going back to your question, should they be broken up? That's, again, that sort of depends more on the political leanings of the lawmakers. Since most of these companies are based in the United States, it relies a lot on the sort of political climate in the US. That said, I think, if you look at the sort of condition here in the US, you have Republicans who are pro business and highly capitalists. They don't believe in regulation, or yeah, essentially passing laws that tend to break up these companies. You also have Democrats who, at least going by, people like Joe Biden, he's more of a moderate Democrat. He's not left leaning in a sense. So I feel like, his sort of strategy is to not rock the boat. Essentially, he's not going to do anything big, like, pass laws that tend to break up monopolies. He's just going to, let sleeping dogs lie. In a potential future where someone like Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren, or even AOC, if they ever come to a position where they have the power to do something like this, then we might see something related to this. But at that point, they'd just be so powerful that I doubt, they'd have the power to buy out lawmakers themselves. So one man or one woman wouldn't be able to do much.
yeah, yeah. That was an interesting conversation. Um, so I would just like to add one last thing, which is on similar lines to Facebook buying Instagram. Tech companies buying other companies. I think there are two reasons behind it. One is the Facebook strategy, which is just buy off the competitor and be the market leader yourself. But the other strategy is obviously, if you find some company which is innovative, and it aligns with your company goal, or on similar lines, you could buy off that company as well, which is similar to Google buying Nest is like an IoT sort of product company, right? So yeah, that I think that's all I would like to add, that there are two reasons. One is just buy off the competitor, and another is, if you integrate it with your company, it becomes something more massive.
Yeah,
And
no.
about
The thing is there, though, that there's a lot riding on consent from both companies, right?
Yeah.
It shouldn't. I think when there's a hostile takeover, such as the case with diapers.com, or I don't know if you term the Instagram acquisition as a hostile one. But if it's a hostile takeover, then something needs to be done about it. How much and to what extent, obviously, is up for debate. But
mm,
acquisitions are always going to be a thing. I know a bunch of startups whose goal is not to actually go to market and
is
become
to
a
be
public
acquired.
company, to be acquired, right? Because they want a
Yeah.
quick payday, which is okay. I mean, that's just another take on business.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But
mm,
companies who want to grow and who want to do their own thing should be left alone, obviously.
yeah.
And obviously we can't rely on the big dogs to just use their morality to make the right decisions.
Yeah. All right then. That was a good conversation. See you guys in the next one.